Picture this. You're walking through the marble streets of ancient Rome. The year is 67 AD. Vendors are shouting, togas flutter in the warm breeze, and in the midst of it all, the most powerful man in the world strolls by, Emperor Nero. Beside him walks a breathtaking young woman in silks and jewels. She's graceful, poised, untouchable, but the whispers are immediate. Because those who live in Nero's Rome already know the truth. That's not a woman, that is Sporus. And the story behind him is one of the most disturbing and forgotten acts of psychological torment in all of ancient history. Before we dive deeper, if you're fascinated by unsettling stories that history tried to bury, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from. We're connected across centuries and continents through our shared curiosity, and today we're stepping into one of the darkest corners of Roman imperial life. Nero didn't start out as a monster. When he became emperor at just 16, many Romans were hopeful. He cut taxes. He funded massive public games. He even took to the stage performing poetry and music, something no emperor had dared before. But power is a poison, and for Nero, it slowly corroded every part of him. By 65 AD, paranoia had taken root. Surrounded by sycophants and yes-men, isolated from reality, Nero saw enemies in every shadow. The only constant was one woman, Poppaea Sabina. She wasn't just beautiful, she was dangerous in all the right ways. Intelligent, charismatic, politically sharp, she had clawed her way up from noblewoman to empress by wielding her charm like a dagger. To Nero, Poppaea was perfection. He divorced his first wife Octavia, cast her aside like old marble, and married Poppaea in a lavish ceremony. But obsession is not love. He watched her constantly, guarded her jealously, isolated her from friends, family, anyone who might influence her. He built statues of her, surrounded himself with her image, and then, one day, she challenged him. Pregnant with their second child, she criticized his priorities. Was it about his obsession with theatre, his neglect of state affairs? Historians disagree. What they do agree on is this. In a fit of rage, Nero struck or kicked her. She collapsed. She died shortly after. So did the unborn child. Nero had killed the one person he couldn't live without. Nero fell apart. He didn't bury her. He embalmed her, built her a tomb more ornate than any royal predecessor, declared her a goddess. He spent days speaking to her corpse, holding ceremonies in her honor, left her chair empty at banquets so guests could pretend she was still with them. To survive in Nero's court meant embracing the fantasy. You didn't mourn Poppaea. You acted as though she'd never left. And then, one day, Nero saw a young man, a palace servant, barely a teenager, Sporus. And the resemblance to Poppaea was uncanny. Sporus was likely 14 or 15 years old, a freedman raised in the palace, educated, groomed for service. But none of that mattered to Nero. What mattered was his face. The emperor became fixated. Here, he believed, was a chance to undo fate, to bring back what he had destroyed. There was only one problem. Sporus was male. But for a man who had declared himself divine, gender was no obstacle. Nero summoned his surgeons. He ordered them to make Sporus female, permanently. The procedure was crude, brutal, likely castration, possibly more. Without modern anesthesia, the pain would have been excruciating. Death from infection was common, but Sporus survived. He awoke to a body he didn't recognize, bearing the scars of a nightmare he never consented to. Nero wasn't done. He gave Sporus a new name, Sabina, after his dead wife. He commissioned gowns, makeup, jewelry, lessons in walking, speaking, even smiling like an empress. Imagine waking up every day in a palace decorated to look like someone else's memory, being forced to pretend you were that person, not just in public but in private. Every look, every gesture, every word monitored. Then came the wedding, an official, full imperial wedding ceremony between Nero and Sporus, the boy who had become a doll, lavish feasts, processions, state witnesses. Nero kissed him in front of the Senate, introduced him as Empress, and Rome played along. Because what choice did they have? For over 2 years, Sporus lived as Nero's wife, attended dinners, sat beside him at games, travelled with him on tour. When Nero went to Greece to perform in competitions, Sporus was there, his living echo of Poppaea, paraded in front of confused foreign dignitaries. But back in Rome, Nero's empire was crumbling. Rebellions erupted. The Senate turned against him. Even the Praetorian Guard abandoned him. In 68 AD, Nero fled with a handful of loyal followers, including Sporus. Cornered in a villa outside Rome, Nero chose suicide over capture. His final words, "What an artist dies in me," and then silence. With Nero gone, Sporus became a symbol of the regime, both prized and cursed. He was passed between powerful men like Lut, Nymphidius Sabinus, Otho, Vitellius. Each forced him to maintain the illusion, dressed him as a woman, called him by Poppaea's name. But under Emperor Vitellius, things turned darker still. Vitellius ordered Sporus to appear in a public spectacle at the Colosseum. A grotesque reenactment of mythological rape. It was too much. Rather than endure one final humiliation, Sporus made the only choice that was truly his. He took his own life, by poison most likely. He was no older than 20. Sporus's story has long been reduced to a footnote in Nero's biography, an oddity, a scandal, but it's so much more. This was a child, transformed into a ghost, a living monument to one man's madness. A performance forced so completely that Sporus's original self was almost lost to history, but not entirely. Because in the end, Sporus made one final, defiant decision. He chose death on his own terms, and in doing so reclaimed a sliver of agency, something denied to him his entire adult life. His story isn't just about Nero's excess, it's about identity, abuse, power, and the resilience of a person caught in the gears of empire. Let's remember him, not just as a living doll, but as a human being. If this story disturbed you, moved you, or made you think, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more dark and hidden stories from the corners of history. Until next time, stay curious.